You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better. Put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the third part of What If Deku Enters Ranma? Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Kane541204 on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Izuku was sweeping the debris from yesterday, trying to get all of the wood and paper picked up. After their talk, Yukio told him that it was okay to rest, let the shop stay closed for the day. When she had said that, Ranma and Akane both looked rather confused. So, Yukio likes making money? Izuku said, taking another swipe at the debris. There was a lot more than it seemed. Again, Yukio and the others were at school. This made Izuku wonder, how old were they? They didn't seem that much older than he was. As he was sweeping, an elderly lady was walking past when she stopped to see the young man sweeping. Oh! Did Yukio finally find herself a man? She asked, making Izuku jump. No, no. Nothing like that. Izuku shouted, waving his hands in front of him. Conveniently dropping the broom. She's letting me stay here and in turn I help around the restaurant. The old woman frowned. Oh. It's a shame. She's such a nice girl. Too good for that brute, Ranma Sotome, she seethed. I wish she would pick someone new, she sighed before walking away. Izuku just watched as the women walked away. He had been informed of Yukio and Ranma's status as fiancés, as well as the problems with that. Now that he was no longer on the move, he could finally understand the situation. Ranma was recently promised to 3 separate hands of marriage, Yukio, Shampoo, and Akane. If Izuku remembered from his conversation with the Amazon elder so long ago, there could have been more than that. Izuku couldn't help but feel sorry for Ranma. After all, who would want to be betrothed to so many girls? Then again, he knew 2 people who would have no problem with that situation. He picked the broom up from the ground, but as he did so he saw a small bit of some kind of slime slowly making its way across the road. Izuku stopped for a moment, watching it. It was slowly making its way along the road. Normally that wouldn't be strange, except that it's traveling uphill. His eyes watched the slime. He could see some colors with it, pink, yellow, browns. It was so strange. He leaned the broom upon the side of the restaurant before following the string. It was slow at first, but then it started to pick up the pace, almost like it noticed it was being followed. After a while, Izuku could see it pooling at the top of the hill. Slowly, struggling out of the slime was the form of a person. Izuku's eyes widened as he rushed over. It was Tsubasa. He was fighting, struggling to get out of the slime. Izuku rushed over, reaching out to him. Grab my hand. Izuku called. Tsubasa reached out to take Izuku's hand only for his hand to splash through, slime coating Izuku's hand. Tsubasa's form fell forward, slamming into the hill and dispersing into slime. Izuku backed up in surprise. What was happening? Izuku tried to scoop up the sludge that was apparently Tsubasa. He was looking about, hoping to put the slime into, instead of letting it slip through his arms and fingers. After a while, he finally found something, a metal bucket. Reaching over, he started scooping up the slime, placing it in the bucket. After a while, the slime began to travel up the side of the bucket, collecting itself into it. As Izuku watched mesmerized, he began thinking. As far as Izuku could see, this world had little to no supernatural stuff happening in it. The most supernatural thing to happen so far is Ranma and the group of cursed individuals. Was Tsubasa cursed? No, that couldn't be it. that stuff only happens with cold water. What could have caused this? After a while, Izuku watched as Tsubasa's head began to form, slowly raising out of slime, and he was panicking. "What is happening to me?" he shouted. He turned to look at Izuku before shouting, "What is this? Help me. Please. I don't know what's going on." Izuku stepped forwards, reaching down to touch Tsubasa's head, but it just felt like slime, with nothing to grip. This gave Izuku an idea. "How is your head all slimy?" Izuku asked, his eyes watching as the form of Tsubasa was becoming more and more prominent. He didn't respond at first, that was until his neck and shoulders became fully formed again. "I don't know. I keep thinking about how I was before and my body goes back to normal. But if my mind slips I go back into that sludge," Tsubasa said, part of his body sliding off and into the bucket, once more a slimy mess. "Hold still," Izuku said. "Not like I intend to go anywhere," Tsubasa shouted. Izuku picked up the bucket, slowly before walking. He had an idea of where to go. If anyone knew, it would be the Amazons. Making his way to the cat cafe, Tsubasa continued to slowly reform, only to spill every now and then. Once they reached the cat cafe however, something in Tsubasa stopped. His face became much more stern before turning to Izuku. "You're not bringing me here, are you?" he asked. Izuku nodded before hefting the bucket a little before opening the door. However, when the door was opened, Tsubasa lurched from the bucket, his form splattering upon the stone path. Izuku yelped and watched as the slime began to hurriedly scuttle away. That wasn't right. "Oh ho! Look who's come to visit," Cologne said, making her presence known. "Izuku, what are you doing here?" Izuku watched as the remains of Tsubasa blinked from view. What was going on? I had encountered a friend. No, definitely not. An acquaintance of Yukio's. Yeah, I met an acquaintance of Yukio's and he was like a slimy sludge. I don't know. It's hard to describe. Izuku said, "Put the bucket down." The moment the bucket touched the ground, the wind picked the bucket up from the ground, slamming it back down. Once, twice, 3 times. Lastly it hit the ground a 4th time before laying still. 4 times, Cologne said, her voice shaking. A bad omen. She closed her eyes, almost like she was focusing. After a while, she opened her eyes again. Young Izuku, returned to Yukio's place. I must look into something. After a couple of days, I'll come speak to you. Izuku nodded his head before turning back. Something wasn't right, but there's nothing else he could do. He could follow Tsubasa, but what would that achieve? He would just run away further. Tsubasa had seemed upset to speak with the Amazons. Why? Had he met them before? Elder, have you ever met a young man dressed as a girl? Izuku asked. Though, he immediately wished he hadn't. Cologne's eyebrows raised, almost reaching the top of her head. No, I can't say I have. Why? She said, suspicion in her voice. Izuku frowned before placing his hand upon his chin. Because, that's the person I was bringing to you. I thought you might be able to help. Izuku's eyes followed the trail left behind by the slime. Something tells me we're going to see him again. Real soon. Elder Cologne nodded, before turning and returning inside the cat cafe. Izuku began to make his way back to Okonomiyaki Yukin's, wondering what could be going on. Was this normal? The answer to that was clearly no, but he didn't know the full extent of this world. He would have to check with Yukio, maybe Tsubasa was cursed like Ranma and Ryoga were. No, that couldn't be right, there wasn't any water nearby to trigger that kind of curse. Though, Ranma had said that you became a water magnet when you're a cursed individual. Either way, he had to find out what to do about Tsubasa, and only one person knew him the best. Down the way in a dark, dirty alleyway Tsubasa found himself once more becoming solid, finally able to walk on his own 2 feet. His clothes were the same, though looking more attached than the rest of him. He stumbled down the alley, his feet making squishing noises as he walked. "What's happening to me?" he screamed into the air, collapsing to his knees. He began pounding his fists into the ground, making that sickening squelching noise with each hit. Unseen by him, the ground was slowly withering away, making a small pothole where his fist made contact. "Your power is awakening, though I have never seen such a unique phenomenon." The voice was back, the man in black had returned, standing over Tsubasa. "It would seem those in this world cannot take a quirk without it mutating. I had given you a simple mutation quirk and yet your body is taking it further, mutating into a new quirk altogether." He laughed, his voice echoing in Tsubasa's head. "You are not the first, nor will you be the last to react this way to my gifts." Tsubasa lowered his head, feeling the sludgy texture run across his whole body. "I didn't want this," he whispered, tears falling from his face. "I didn't want to become some monster," he shouted, looking up. When he did so, the man reached down and patted his head. "You are no monster," he said, his voice soft. "You are something special. Come along, and I will take you somewhere you can learn to HRNSS your new power. There are others. Other students who will help you." Behind the man in black stepped in another person, a man by the looks of it. He was clad in a dark green Chinese top and trousers with what looked to be a set of red pantyhose around his waist. "He will take you away from this place. To help you learn your new power." The man in black looked to the man in green before slowly his body began to fade again. "Come on," the remaining man said, lifting Tsubasa up by the arm. "He wants everyone ready." "Ready?" Tsubasa asked, "Ready for what?" The man sneered, "I don't know, but whatever it is he wants, it's worth it. He has power to give and I'm willing to take it. I don't care where it comes from." With that he began walking away, slowly making deliberate footfalls before finally coming to a halt. He turned to stare at Tsubasa for a moment before saying, "Are you coming or what?" Tsubasa didn't know why, but he snapped to attention and began following this stranger. Hoping that whatever it was that was happening to him would allow him to take his sweet Yukio away from Ranma-sama. No matter the cost. Yukio sighed as she, Ranma, and Akane were walking back to her restaurant. They had waited all day for Tsubasa to do something, anything, to start the fight he promised to have with Ranma. Yet they saw no hide nor hair of him. After walking for some time, Ranma and Akane both departed, saying they would call if something came up. She sighed before approaching her shop. The front looked immaculate, it seemed Izuku made it his job to get it cleaned for her today. She smiled fondly before entering. The door was still missing, but the front was getting repaired, so she couldn't complain too much. Once she entered, she noticed that Izuku was standing behind the counter, his hand on his chin. He was rambling again and with no one to stop him, he was in too deep. Yukio watched him for a second, wondering who it was that she invited to live in her home. Time to answer that question. Yukio slammed her giant spatula down onto the counter, making a loud ringing noise echo throughout the room. Izuku jumped before he settled down upon noticing Yukio. "Oh, Yukio. You came back," he said, his face in a frown. "You may want to have a seat." She frowned in confusion before sitting down at the counter. "What is it?" she asked, placing her bag down next to her. "Has Tsubasa ever turned into a slime or some kind of sludge before?" Izuku asked. Yukio balked at him for a minute before she started laughing. After a couple of minutes she stopped before her eyes met Izuku's. "Wait, you cannot be serious," she said, matter-of-factly. "You are the fiancé to a man who becomes a woman when splashed with cold water." Izuku counter. Yukio opened her mouth to retort but stopped herself. He was right, though the fact that it was said out loud made it sound really dumb. She sighed before waving Izuku to continue. "I saw him today, a little ways from here, actually. He was struggling to escape it for a while. Then I realized it was coming from him. I was planning on taking him to the Amazons, but he wasn't having it. He got away from me before I could do much else." Izuku said. Yukio placed her head into her hands as she listened to him. That's odd. Tsubasa shouldn't even know the Amazons. That's what I thought. Izuku said. Elder Cologne didn't seem to know him either. I'm worried something might be wrong with Tsubasa. Izuku leaned against the wall close by. I just wish I knew what I could do to help him. Yukio felt herself tilt her head towards him. Even though you basically made him run away crying yesterday? Yukio asked, her tone joking. Especially because of that. Izuku said, dead serious. You really have a hero complex, don't you? Yukio said, lifting her head up, though she was smiling. Time to start asking him questions. Best to get to know him now before something else happens. It was Ranma. It was guaranteed that something crazy was coming. What else do you like? Who? Izuku asked, clearly confused. Where's this coming from all of a sudden? His face was slowly becoming more red. Well, Yukio considered her words for a moment before speaking. I want to know who it is that I have invited into my home, you know. So come on, tell me. What are your hobbies? What do you do when you're not out there being a big hero? Izuku's face was still becoming red, though he smiled slightly. Well, usually I'm working on my body, trying to get it ready to be a hero. I know that. Tell me something interesting. She threw her hands in the air for a moment, something only you do. Come on. There's got to be a hobby or two that you do when you're relaxing. Izuku considered it for a moment. Something only he did? Well, there wasn't a whole hell of a lot to add for that list. However, one thing did come to mind. I guess, it would be my quirk analysis books, he said. Quirk analysis? Yukio asked, repositioning herself on the bar stool. What's that? Izuku's red face finally bloomed into a full blush at this point. Well, it's something I like to do. When a new hero appears, or I see a new quirk in action, I try to analyze it. If I can figure out how it works, I can see how powerful they are. He smiled a little. Remembering the first couple of books he had written out. When I had started making them, I had written them as hero analysis for the future. Back then, Izuku stopped. Could he tell her? After a couple of moments, he decided. Back then, I didn't have my quirk. Oh, Yukio questioned. I'm assuming yours didn't just appear. Izuku shook his head before speaking. No, mine was given to me. By who? She asked. By the greatest hero of all time. Izuku answered, his face breaking into a dumb grin. All Might. All Might? Sounds pretentious. Yukio said. She smiled at the aghast look on Izuku's face. What? With a name like that, Ranma would try and fight him just as much as he did you. After a couple of minutes, Izuku nodded. She was right, of course. So. What made him the greatest? Yukio asked, leaning forward. All Might is the coolest. He could battle 10 different villains at once and win. He could carry 20 people from the burning wreckage of a building and kept going. Izuku said, pumping his fists in the air. He had so many battles, all of which he would win. Growing up, I wanted to be a hero, just like him. To save as many people as I could, with a smile on my face. Yukio nodded. He sounds amazing. Though I can't help but notice, you're using past tense. Izuku's smile turned sad for a moment. Yeah. He battled with a villain. When All Might was done with that fight, he had to retire. Izuku's smile slowly began to fade. That villain is actually the reason I'm here, actually. He wants my power. Yukio frowned. Why? Izuku sighed. This was going to be a long conversation. Well, the story's rather long. Are you okay with that? Yukio nodded her head before Izuku began to explain the story behind All for One and One for All. How All for One made it by giving his brother the stockpiling ability, how the quirk evolved and was passed down. And one day, Izuku was saying now, I meet All Might. He had just captured a sludge villain and I had a question for him. What question was that? Yukio asked, engrossed. If I could be a hero, like him, Izuku said, smiling fondly at the old memory. It felt like a lifetime ago. You know what he said to me? No. Yukio said, rolling her eyes. Obviously I don't. He said I couldn't become a hero. Because I didn't have a quirk. Izuku said. The funnest thing was, he never resented All Might for saying what he did that day. To Izuku, it's what led to the events that happened next. Needless to say, the sludge villain got away while we were talking and had captured a friend of mine. After hearing that, I was distraught, yet I still went to the scene. There, I saw my friend being buried in the sludge. I still don't know what made me do it, but I ran out. My body had started to move on its own. Yukio gasped slightly. Did All Might have to save you too? Izuku nodded. Yeah, he did, but All Might apologized for what he had said to me. He finished off the sludge villain and saved us. After I left, All Might followed me and gave me an offer. To become his successor and gain his quirk. One for all. Wow. Yukio breathed, doesn't that ever get confusing? All for one and one for all. Izuku laughed slightly. Yeah, it does from time to time. Though, I haven't really had troubles with it. I spent so much time with one for all before I even knew about all for one. Yukio nodded. So, is all for one the villain you're so worried about? Yeah. Izuku said. He wants my power. I'm assuming it's because of how powerful it's gotten over time. Plus it's one of the few quirks out there that can stop him. Izuku yawned slightly before walking out from behind the counter and taking a seat next to Yukio. But, enough about me. What about you? What do you want to know? It's only fair, I suppose. Yukio asked, shrugging her shoulders. Well, how do you and Ranma know each other? What's the deal with that? Izuku asked, placing his hands upon the counter. Well, Ranma and I knew each other back when we were children. Ranma and his dad would come by and get free meals from my dad. Back then, I was a bit of a tomboy. Yukio said. The way I spoke, dressed, acted. Didn't matter. Ranma spent most of his childhood thinking I was a boy, she sighed, placing her hands upon the countertop as well. One day, Genma talks to my father and convinced him to give him the cart, in exchange Ranma and I would be married. The cart would act like a dowry. She frowned, her voice was full of frustration and contempt. Izuku nodded his head. I'm assuming that did not happen, he asked, his voice soft. Apparently this was still a sore subject with Yukio. Yukio shook her head. No. Genma asked Ranma if he preferred me or the okonomiyaki. Of course, Ranma's still a kid and doesn't know any better. She clenched her hands together into a ball, trying to keep the anger from her voice. Genma Satom made this happen. He's the one who stole my family's lives from us. He left me there, chasing the down as he ran off with the cart. Ranma riding the top of the cart waving goodbye to me all the while. Her head fell for a moment. I swore then that I would have my revenge. Though that hasn't really happened yet. It probably never will. Ranma knows I'm a girl now and has apologized for what his father did. But that doesn't make it hurt any less. Izuku said. Yukio didn't answer, simply nodding her head. You know the funny thing about all of this? 3 of us girls are fighting for Ranma's attention, but the one who fights the least is the one winning. Yukio said, her voice strained. Izuku remained quiet, trying to think of a way to step away from this conversation. Before he could say anything, however, Yukio laughed to herself. It's funny. Ranma only sees me as a friend, he's always getting annoyed with Shampoo, and constantly makes fun of Akane. But if Akane was in trouble, you can believe Ranma would move heaven and earth to ensure she was safe. Tears had begun to pool in Yukio's eyes, her hands were starting to become white. Izuku reached out a hand, placing it upon Yukio's. She froze for a moment, looking Izuku in the face before wiping away her tears. Sorry. That was kind of depressing, she said. Though Izuku's face was once more blushing. One of these days, I'm hoping that Ranma will see me for who I am. That I am his fiancé. I've played the game the others have, manipulating him isn't working. All I want is for him to see me. Not as his friend, but as his fiancé. Izuku nodded his head. He wanted to say something, but he didn't know what. He had never been in this kind of situation, thus he didn't know what kind of comfort to give. Yukio seemed so heartbroken. It was then that Izuku decided. He would see what he could do for Yukio. So she could have her dream. After a couple of minutes, Izuku let go of her hands, now that she wasn't squeezing them to death. He stood up and began making his way back around the counter. Once there, he turned the grill on. What are you doing? Yukio asked. Something my mom always did for me, when I was upset, he said before pulling out some ingredients. She would always make me my favorite food and give me a smile. No matter what, I always felt better afterwards. It showed me how much she cared. Never in words, but it was enough. I knew, he said, beginning to work on the recipe in front of him. So, let me do this for you, Yukio. If nothing else, to try and get you to smile. Yukio brushed the tears off her face, watching him work. It had only been 2 days since he had started working for her, but he was picking up the work fairly well. Not perfect, Kami knows, but it was the thought that counted. Every now and again, he would make a mistake and Yukio would have to correct him. After a while, they were making okonomiyaki, if only to make it. It was nice, Yukio thought to herself, to have a friend working on her art with her. Izuku would blush every time he would make a mistake. After a couple of tries he finally got it, though it wasn't perfect. Once they had a pile of okonomiyaki, Izuku sighed, his fingers feeling numb from working with the spatula for so long. Yukio was inspecting the stack before nodding to herself. I bet I could pre-package these and sell them at school, she said, pounding a fist into her hand. I bet I could make a killing. Izuku smiled. She wasn't sad anymore. She turned to him, a smile on her face. Thank you, Izuku. I really appreciate it. Izuku didn't know why, but that smile on her face made his stomach feel different, like a bunch of butterflies were flapping about. He nodded his head, giving her his own smile. This was enough, he thought. That night, Yukio went to her room as Izuku set up his coat downstairs. He was sleeping in the restaurant itself, mostly because Yukio didn't really have another room. But as he lay in his bed, he was smiling. Today had been a good day, the events with Tsubasa completely forgotten. Tsubasa was following the weirdo with the pantyhose, wondering where in the hell they were going. After a couple of hours, he held up his hand to stop Tsubasa. He stopped for a moment before they started walking again. It had been hours now, their walk seemingly traveling great distances in a matter of hours. Finally, they arrived at what looked to be some kind of dojo in the middle of the mountain range. There, seated at the foot of the rocks was a woman, with long black hair, falling past her shoulders and to the small of her back. She was clad in a black leotard with what looked to be like a ribbon wrapped around her arm. She didn't seem to notice them, though the doors to the dojo opened suddenly. There, standing in the front door of the dojo was a man, clad in a black kimono with a sash wrapped around his waist. In his hand was a kendo stick, though from the looks of it, the kendo stick was about to snap off from overuse. Kuno. Tsubasa's SCRT said, his voice rather heated. He walked past Kuno, simply stepping into the building. Taro. Kuno said, in the same angered voice. Do you bring any words? Word of what? He said to bring this one here. It's like our forces are growing by the day. Taro said, his hand in the air. Why we don't just attack is beyond me. Yes, it would be beyond you, Kuno said, his voice classed with a tone of someone who thought themselves better than everyone else. Such a simple-minded creature like you cannot afford to be daydreaming, Taro. I would be careful if I were you. Kuno sneered at Taro, who in turn walked up to Kuno and got into his face. I am far stronger than you, rich boy. You want to test out that new power of yours? I bet you don't even know how to use it. Taro shouted. Enough, children. The time is almost ripe for use, that hollow voice returned once again. I have gathered you all here for but one purpose. And what purpose would that be? Kuno asked, now that I have the power to bring down that foul wretch Sotome. Why do I need you? The man in black laughed before answering. Because your chance is approaching. I need you all to do me a favor, capture Izukumidoriya and bring him here. When he arrives I will return him and myself back to our world, the man said. After that, you all may do as you please. Think of this as a test run, to see how all of your powers work. Kuno sneered again, sparks of electricity slowly beginning to fly off his apparel. The young woman, Kodachi Kuno, had the ribbon floating off of her body, like it had a mind of its own, while Taro simply crossed his arms. Tsubasa saw this, before shrinking slightly back. What was it that he had gotten himself into? After some time, they all deactivated their quirks while the man turned to their newest recruit. This one is new to his power. While you three have had a few weeks to learn and MSTR your quirks, this one needs time to train. Take the time to MSTR them. Defeating Izukumidoriya will be much easier if you all work together, the man in black said. Good luck, my children, remember what it is you are doing this for. Let that be your guide. Tsubasa thought of Yukio, her connection to Ranma. How it boiled his blood to know that Ranma was so close to her, maybe even now. They could be fooling around, all while he was here. He felt his resolve hardening. He remembered she and Ranma had both named the green-haired boy in her restaurant as Izuku. He smirked to himself. He had something he could bring to the table, to discuss how to bring Izuku in. I might be able to help with capturing him. That night, the four began to plan their next course of action. As they did so, All for One stepped out of the building before making his way back to Naruma. He had two more possible allies he could make, to accept his gifts and become a whirlwind of chaos upon this new world. He did not care for the after effects, merely the results. If these new, potential villains could do what the League of Villains could not, he would be very surprised. However, he did not expect them to beat Izuku. No, he expected them to fail trying. Every quirk he had given within this new world so far had been a copy, made by the doctor well before his arrival. He was merely chasing Izuku to force his return. Even his own quirk was a copy. Every step he took his form would fade out, returning to its original host. There, All for One would send a copy of himself back to that world, with a new quirk to hand out. He smiled in his mansion, in another world. It had only been a month since Midoriya had gone missing. The remaining heroes had begun searching for him. Some believed he was in hiding. All for One knew better. He began pulling his own operation once more into hiding, until he could find the one quirk that could stop him. He would find Izukumidoriya, even if it was worlds apart. Well, Izukumidoriya. It's your move, he said, placing his hand upon his exposed, scared cheek. Cologne was so confused. She had been taking the week to try and come up with a plan, something that could send Izuku back to his home. At least, that was the case until Izuku showed up and told her about some boy in a dress. She was trying to think if maybe she did know the boy, but knew for fact that she would remember. Bouncing into the cafe, she had made her way deeper into the building until she arrived at her room. She had taken the time to begin meditating, thinking upon what she had heard. After some time, she felt a twinge once more, this time more forcefully than it normally was. Ever since Izukumidoriya's arrival in their world, Cologne had been feeling a pain in the back of her head, a malicious and dark pain that seemed to spawn from nothing. Yet, now she could feel it in full force almost every day. It would hang around for a minute or so, before disappearing. Yet, every day it would be there, for a time. This time however, the pain wasn't leaving. Her eyes flew open before she grabbed her staff and bounced out of her room, quickly flying through the cafe at high speeds, using her staff like a pogo stick. Soon, she was being followed by Shampoo, who had seen her grandmother leaving. "What is it, great-grandmother?" Shampoo said in Chinese. Her face was contorted in confusion as she followed after Cologne. She didn't answer exactly, following the feeling that was coming from her mind. It was like she could feel where this presence was. Bouncing along the rooftops, she made her way to Okonomiyaki Yukin's. There was no time. As Yukio and Izuku were cleaning up after a rather hard lunch rush, the door to the restaurant flew open. They both turned to the door, seeing Cologne there. "Midoriya. That presence is here. I can feel it." Izuku's eyes widened, before his body began to crackle with power. "Lead the way," he shouted, throwing the apron onto the counter. Cologne once more began moving. Izuku, Shampoo, and Cologne began their trek, making their way towards what looked like some kind of mountainside. "Where are we going, Elder?" Izuku asked, one for all crackling at 30%. Cologne didn't say anything. The pain was building, not fading. Whatever it was that was breaking through was here. Once entering the forested range, they continued along, following a path that looked well traveled. Following the path up the mountain, they could hear a rather loud stomping sound coming from ahead of them. It didn't take long to find out what it was. Standing in front of the path was a rather large-looking black bull, with brilliant white wings and a snake for a tail. The three stopped halfway along. The bull noticed them instantly, and its body began shaking as if it was laughing, a gruff sound coming from its throat. Quickly, the three scattered into different directions. The bull's head followed Izuku, his eyes dilating for a moment before giving a loud roar. He charged, heading in the direction that Izuku had gone. Izuku, for the most part, was focused purely on figuring out what the hell this thing was. He noticed it was following him, so thinking quickly, he charged one for all to 40% before flicking his finger, "Air Force," he shouted, firing his air-based projectile. It slammed into the bull, only for it to seem like it hardly did anything. Hell, the bull just shrugged it off and continued the chase. Izuku's eyes widened before preparing to flick his finger again. 45% Air Force, he shouted, flicking it again. Once again, no reaction. Growling, Izuku reared back his fist, leaving one for all at 45%. "Texas Smash," he shouted just as the bull reached him. His fist hit the bull square in the chest, yet, the beast merely laughed again before reaching down with his large hand. Thinking fast, Izuku dropped down into a lower stance before launching himself into the air. Flipping in the air, Izuku delivered an axe kick to the top of the bull's head, "Manchester. Smash," he shouted. The bull buckled for a second before reaching up and grabbing Izuku's leg. Quickly, Izuku found himself being hurled off, flying through several trees before slamming into one and dropping to the ground. He coughed as he felt a sharp pain in his back, but he slowly stood back up as the bull approached him. "What the hell are you?" Izuku asked, more for himself than anything. The bull didn't reply, simply stepping closer to him, its hand reaching towards him. Quickly, Izuku launched himself forward, kicking the offending hand out of the way before closing the distance. The attack on the creature's head had worked last time, maybe it would work this time. Gritting his teeth, he willed one for all to climb in power, 48%. 49%. 50%. He could feel his bones rattle slightly as spun in the air, launching a sideways kick into the side of the bull's head. "Smash," he shouted through gritted teeth. The bull lurched at attack, his body shifting, yet it seemed as if no real damage was done. The bull began to laugh again before rearing his own fist back. Izuku moved, hopping to the side as the bull's fist collided with the spot he was prior. The bull's fist buried itself deep into the ground, the earth itself shaking. As the creature was trying to unstick his hand from the earth, Izuku launched Black Whip to the creature's sides, jumping into the air and began pumping his legs. When he felt a significant amount of power, he launched himself forward, boosted with FA gene, he reared back ready to strike. Fo 100 Izuku began to scream, only for a large hand to swing out, catching the green-haired hero right out of the air by his head. Izuku's eyes widened. No one had been able to stop one of his most powerful attacks. He had been using it for most of his battles, he had a good grasp on getting it to work most fights. His hand struggled to peel the black paws that encircled his head. He could feel the fingers moving slightly, only for the creature to adjust its grip upon his head. It was getting harder to think, Izuku's head felt like it was going to explode in pain. He let one for all reach 100%, focusing them in his fingers. He slowly lifted his hand up, leveling it with the creature's head. Almost on instinct, he flicked his fingers. The attack did exactly what he had hoped, smashing into the creature's face, forcing it backwards, letting Izuku drop to the ground. Izuku sucked in his breath, his finger broken from the attack. It had been a long time since he had to break one of his limbs. He cradled his fingers in his hand, slowly raising from his seated position. The creature was stumbling about for a moment, letting Izuku study his opponent. Something was wrong. He could feel it. Each attack he had landed so far seemed as if they weren't doing nearly as much damage as they should have been. It didn't seem as if any of his attacks were making any sort of progress. So what was it that was happening? This reminded Izuku a lot about the USJ and the Nomu that All Might had battled. Each attack was met with little reaction. The creature was clutching its face before turning to look at Izuku, its eyes dilating once more in anger. Izuku knew then what he had to do. He needed to find the others and get out of there. They needed to regroup. Maybe together they could deal with this thing. Scanning the area for a split second, Izuku bolted in a direction that he hoped he would find one of the Amazons that had led him there. Cologne was running through the forest, hoping to find an alternative route to what she hoped would be answers. Slowly, she could feel the pain in the back of her head disappearing, finally giving her some kind of peace. She stopped for a moment before her instincts kicked in, forcing her to jump straight up in the air. As she did so, a bright pink ribbon embedded itself into the tree that had been behind her. She landed upon her walking stick, seeing the one who had attacked her with such a weapon. There, standing not too far from her, was a young woman with black flowing hair and wearing a black leotard. Next to her was a man, his hair was the same onyx black while he was wearing a traditional Japanese kimono. In his grip was a bakken wooden sword. Rather odd. She glared at the pair. Attacking an opponent without their foreknowledge. Clever, but not against me, she cackled a little at her own joke. Spare us your trite, woman. We are not here for you, the boy spoke, his voice full of arrogance. Once we have the boy, everything will fall into place. He gripped his wooden stick in hand before rushing forward, lighting arching off his body as he moved. It seemed almost like it happened instantly, with the boy being in one place, then instantly in another. It had almost been too fast for Cologne to have seen. Almost. She blocked the attack of the boy, using her stick as an impromptu sword. The two clashed, their wooden instruments meeting. The woman was watching for a moment before 3-round RBB ball began floating from behind her. Her eyes widened, anger washing over her visage. The ball flew, lightning fast at Cologne. Quickly, Cologne jumped into the air, landing upon one of the tree branches above her. She pulled out a small pipe before lighting it up. Ah yes. Now I remember you too. You're the Kuno siblings, is that correct? She asked, taking a drag from the pipe. Kuno grit his teeth, staring at the woman before shouting, we are in the middle of a battle and you run from me. Tatewaki Kuno. Cowardly, all of you. Cologne glanced at him before taking another drag off of the pipe. Cowardly, you say? Yet she has only attacked me with objects. How is it you two have come by your powers? Those were never yours, if I remember the stories I have heard, she said, letting some of the ash out of the pipe. Kuno smirked. Oh. Wondering about the abilities we have mastered, he asked, well, who am I to deny you the answer? After all, no matter the knowledge you have, my victory is assured. Kuno gripped his bakken for a moment before lowering it slightly. A kind gentleman gave them to us, and in return we are to give him the one known as izukumidoriya. Kuno's smirk grew wickeder than before. Now then, enough talk. Have at you, he shouted, swinging the bakken at the tree. It was at this moment that Cologne noticed a thin strp of metal lining the back of the bakken. It touched the tree and in an instant the tree exploded, steam rising rapidly from within it. She fell from her branch and quickly rotated her body around, using the momentum to swing her stick at the boy. It collided with his head, launching him off deeper into the forest. Quickly, she dashed off, gymnastic clubs and hoops sailing past her as she ran. She needed to find Izuku, before it was too late. As she was running, once more the pain from earlier was back, stronger than ever. She turned before making her way towards it. Shampoo growled in frustration as she stopped running. Nothing was chasing her. She could tell. She could hear the roar of the bull and the sound of battle. And yet, here she was, standing in a rather open clearing with little to nothing happening. What the hell was she doing? She was a warrior. She growled again before sighing. She turned to make her way back the way she came. Maybe she could help her great-grandmother. Something. Before she could leave, however, she felt a hand fall upon her shoulder. Swiftly raising her weapons up only for them to be stopped in the air. There standing in front of her was a man dressed in black. His face covered by a rather intricate mask. Hello my dear, he said, his mask translating to Chinese. Shampoo jumped backwards, her weapons raised in front of herself. What do you want? She asked. Not many would speak to me in my own language. That is because most don't know you, my dear, the man said, holding a hand up. His voice sounded weird, though Shampoo knew she shouldn't trust him. Something was wrong with him. I have heard of your plight, as have I with everyone I have recruited. Your story doesn't seem that different. You love someone, but can't claim them for yourself, can you? He asked her plainly. She gritted her teeth, her hands slightly shaking. Not to worry, my dear. I can help you. He slowly extended his hand towards her. All you have to do is take my hand. I will explain to you your value. Then, you may remove any obstacle that is keeping you from that choice. Shampoo's eyes widened, drifting between his hand and his face. Was it true? Could this man give her something to claim Ranma for herself? Maybe this charade could finally be over and she could return to the village. She could go home, with Ranma by her side. Yet, she stopped herself for a moment. Oh. Why hesitate, my dear? Is it that you do not wish to take up the mantle? To become ever stronger than any who would get in your way? His hand was still outstretched, his body so still that Shampoo couldn't tell if he was still alive. Or maybe, you wish to allow those above you to claim your prize. Shampoo screamed in anger, throwing one of the chui in her hands at the man. In an instant, it shattered around him, leaving nothing but tatters of what it once was. He didn't say anything, Shampoo's eyes widening in horror. He slowly began walking towards her as she fell to her knees, her body feeling weaker. She dropped her head down, feeling downcast. He placed his hand under her chin, lifting it up so that he may look upon her. She didn't fight it, how could she? She hadn't even seen what he had done to her weapon. What if he killed her just as fast? It was then he spoke once more. I can see it in your eyes, my dear. You want to win, to be stronger than the rest. Allow me to help you, and your prize is free for you to claim. His voice trailed off, his hand leaving her face, yet it still was inches from it, held out to help her up. Take my hand, and you may have what you wish for so greatly. Ranma, Shampoo's mind wondered. If she was stronger. If she was better. Could she take him? Make him hers and end the games with the other fiancés? She could do it, become so strong that they couldn't fight her. Slowly, she reached out her hand. That was what she wanted, more than anything. Once it was in the grasp of the man, with a snap, the two disappeared, but not without a scream echoing from the edge of the clearing. Shampoo. Izuku could hear Elder Cologne screams, pivoted on the spot and began running in that direction. He could hear the bull's hoof falls behind him growing distant. It would seem he had lost the bull for the time being. He ran as fast as he could, arriving at the edge of the clearing. He spotted Elder Cologne, kneeling in the grass, her eyes glassy. Cologne. Where's Shampoo? We need to get out of here, he shouted. Making it to the elderly. She wasn't moving. All she could do was mouth, "She's gone," over and over again. Looking around, Izuku looked to see if he could spot anything. He didn't see anything, yet he felt a knot in his stomach. Something had been heard. Something familiar. That's when his eyes widened. He had felt this once before, yet then he had almost vomited. Why was danger sense not triggering beforehand? Shouldn't he have felt it upon All for One's arrival? It would have to be something to think about later. He quickly reached down, picking up the elder and her walking stick before charging off the mountain. They lost this round today, but they would be ready for the next one. Yukio watched as Izuku went charging out the front door of the restaurant. All she could do was scratch the top of her head. That doesn't seem good, she whispered before jumping over the counter, flipping the sign closed before chasing after them. She was going to do her absolute best to try and help, keeping her large spatula on her back. Looking about it became abundantly clear that she wasn't going to follow them. Great, she huffed. After a couple of seconds, she decided the best thing she could do was to tell someone. Ranma, to be more specific. Turning on the spot, she began running in the opposite direction, making her way to the Tendo dojo. As she ran, she had begun worrying about the three that had run off. Shampoo not so much, but Cologne and Izuku? Definitely worried. She would have to make sure things were prepared for them to make it back. Upon her arrival at the Tendo dojo, she opened the door before charging to the living room, having done so many times before. Kasumi poked her head out of the kitchen, watching the back of the young girl as she ran. I wonder what's going on this time, she asked herself before returning to the kitchen. Yukio opened the door to the living room, the occupants turning to her once the door opened. Son and Gema turned to her from their shoji board before Gema turned the board around with Son's attention upon Yukio. Akane was sitting at the table, a small cup in her hands, her eyes going wide upon seeing Yukio. It seemed Ranma and Nabiki were not around. Akane. Yukio said, her breath short. Where's Ranma? She said in between breaths. Akane's eyebrows crossed in frustration for a moment, yet Yukio charged forward, seeing the anger in her eyes. Yukio grabbed Akane by the shoulders, it's important. Cologne and Izuku charged off too. Kami knows where, she said, her voice slightly cracking. So please just tell me where Ranma is. Akane's eyes widened, seeing the one rival she actually liked, slowly breaking under an unseen weight. She took a minute before she found her voice, he's out in the dojo. Yukio, what's going on? Without a word, Yukio ran out the side door, leading to the yard. She ran, her breath causing a small stitch in her side. Akane set the cup down before running after Yukio. Something was wrong. Yukio slammed the door to the dojo open. Standing in the center of the room, Ranma had just finished the last step of one of his many katas. He sighed before turning to the door, only to see Yukio approaching him. Hey Yukin. Ranma started to say, only to see the look in Yukio's eyes. What's wrong? He said. Cologne and Shampoo came by the restaurant today. Yukio said, trying to catch her breath. All she said was that something was here and Izuku charged after her. I tried to follow them, but they were too fast. She finally stopped, dropping to her knees, trying to catch her breath. I guess, I came here to try and warn you. I think something is coming. Something big. Cologne and Izuku wouldn't have run off like they did if it was something serious. Ranma and Akane's eyes locked for a moment, taking in Yukio's words. What would have made them charge off without Yukio? Then again, Izuku wasn't the kind of person to involve others in a fight if he could avoid it. If Cologne collected him, then it must have been important. Ranma sat down, crossing his legs. He placed his hand upon his cheek in thought. I wonder what it could be. Ranma asked out loud. You said that Cologne was the one to get him. Maybe we should go to the cat cafe. Wait for them to show up. Yukio nodded slowly. She stood, her legs slightly shaking. She almost fell over before Akane grabbed her arm. Are you okay? She asked. Yukio nodded for a moment. She hadn't run that far. Why was she shaking so bad? She had made that same run multiple times in the time she had been in Tokyo, yet today her legs felt like lead, her knees stinging with pain, and her chest felt as if it was clenched in a vice. She needed to figure it out. Taking a deep breath, she steadied herself before finally she was standing on her own. Let's get going, she said, before taking slow deliberate steps. Akane and Ranma nodded their heads before following her out. They all walked, making their way to the cat cafe, yet Yukio slowly fell behind. Her mind running at a mile an hour. She was mindlessly rubbing her chest slightly, trying to ease whatever pain was forming there. It was strange. The shaking had faded, now she had a small pain that was building, her heart beating at a faster rate than normal. It only took a couple of moments before she realized what it was. She was worried. More than she thought she would have been. Was it strange? As the three of them walked, Ranma looked back at Yukio for a moment. What's got her so down? He asked. Really? Akane asked, an eyebrow raised for a moment. She's worried, Ranma. Izuku's her friend and just watching him run off like that. Yeah, but he'll be fine. Ranma said, waving off her comment. He's way too strong to be stopped by something stupid. Says the guy who brings in most of that stupid stuff. Akane said, giving Ranma a side eye. Not on purpose. Ranma said, it's not like I asked for all of this. Akane just scoffed before they finally arrived at the cat cafe. The sign still read, closed, yet the door was unlocked. Clearly it was closed in a rush. Opening the door, the two poked their heads inside. There were plenty of indicators that things had been stopped mid-lunch, it seemed. There were numerous bowls of leftover noodles and other foods, some were still hot based on the steam that was coming from one bowl closest to the door. Walking inside, the three sat at one of the booths, waiting. Yet, after a couple of minutes, Yukio began to fidget until finally she stood from the booth and began cleaning the remaining food. What are you doing, Yukio? Akane asked, watching the young girl as she picked up a couple of bowls. Yukio sighed before turning to Akane, just sitting here is driving me crazy. So, I'm going to keep myself busy until one of the Amazons gets back and we can find out what's going on. She reached down for another bowl, placing it inside the others and carried them to the back. We've only been waiting for only a couple of minutes, right? Ranma asked, half whispering to Akane. She had a thoughtful look on her face for a moment before nodding her head. The two watched Yukio work. At first they had thought about helping her, but realized that would be a big mistake. It seemed that getting in Yukio's way was likely to get your head bitten off, metaphorically speaking. Akane had tried to take some of the bowls from her to carry them away and had gotten snapped at for her troubles. I guess, Akane started to say, watching Yukio more. She had been upset when Yukio had snapped at her, but something was telling her to watch her mouth. She's really upset. I hardly noticed. Ranma said sarcastically, his head leaning on his hand. He had tried to wipe down one of the tables that Yukio had cleaned off and had apparently been in her way. It seemed like Yukio was determined to make this place spotless by herself. About 30 minutes passed, and Yukio had just finished cleaning most of the tables, the dishes in the back, when the front doors finally opened. On her stick, was the elder Cologne. Her visage was clearly upset, her frown making her face sag. Behind her, cradling his hand in his arm, was Izuku. Both looked roughed up, with Izuku looking the worst of the two. Upon seeing them, Yukio ran forward and tackled Izuku into a hug. "You're okay," she was saying, holding him for a moment. Elder Cologne looked at the young girl, her eyebrow raised for a moment before saying, "If what just happened is any indication, okay, isn't the word I would use." She pulled out her pipe before taking a huge puff off it. Akane looked around, noticing someone was missing. "Yukio," she said, catching the other girl's attention. "Didn't you say Shampoo was there too?" Ranma and Yukio looked about, wondering if they had missed the other Amazon, yet none of them could see her. "It's pointless to go looking for her now," Cologne said, a sharp bit in her tone, her eyes glaring at Izuku. "Now that she's been taken away, that is." "Taken?" Ranma exclaimed, his fist clenched. "What the hell happened?" he asked, looking between Cologne and Izuku. Yukio was looking Izuku up and down until she noticed his hand, primarily, his finger. Droplets of blood had begun to slowly fall from his hand as he held it. "What happened, Izuku?" she asked, her voice tiny. Cologne bounced behind the counter before pulling out a first aid kit and tossed it at Izuku. He caught it, only to flinch as he held it with his injured hand. The two kept quiet before either of them spoke, the only sound coming from Izuku fighting with the first aid kit. Yukio pulled Izuku over to one of the booths before she helped him open the kit and started to bandage up his finger. It was only once his finger was bandaged did they say anything. "He's here," Izuku said simply. Yukio frowned. "You're talking about All for One, aren't you?" she said simply, remembering the conversation the two had what felt like a while ago. Izuku nodded his head before placing his hand upon the table. "It seems, All for One has been recruiting. He's giving people quirks," Izuku said. According to Cologne, she ran into a pair of siblings out in the woods that didn't show any kind of previous supernatural power, yet all of a sudden they have powers. Plus, let's not forget that weird bull thing that attacked me. At the confused look upon the others' faces, Izuku sighed before explaining everything that had happened, from leaving Yukio's shop to now. At the end of it, Elder Cologne explained her side of the story, her encounter with the Kuno siblings and finally at the tail end of Shampoo's encounter with All for One. "And they just disappeared?" Akane asked, her voice incredulous. Cologne took a puff from her pipe again. "Isn't that what I just said?" She glared at Akane for a moment before taking a drag off of the pipe and letting the smoke leave her mouth. "Now I have no idea where I can find my granddaughter, or what he wants with her." The pipe in Cologne's hand began to shake slightly. Izuku's eyes hadn't left the table, his head slightly bowed. "None of this would have happened if I wasn't here." "You're right," Cologne said sharply, her eyes fixated upon Izuku. "But now that my granddaughter is caught in the middle of all this, know that you will be settling this before you return home. Your stay here could have been shortened had you done as I had requested. Now you will not be going home any time soon until my granddaughter is brought back to me." She was now inches from Izuku's face, the pipe long forgotten. Izuku's eyes met the elder's before he nodded. "No matter the situation, this is your fault. Had you simply allowed us to house you, I could have figured out a way to send you home sooner." He didn't say anything before Elder Cologne jumped from the table. She slowly began to walk away before saying over her shoulder, "I would recommend staying away from the cafe for a couple of days, Midoriya. My temper with you would only grow and we do not need me losing my cool." With that she left the four in the main room, alone with their thoughts. "Kuno with superpowers, who?" Ranma asked slightly, "Don't know if that makes me nervous or not." "I know I'm concerned," Akane said simply. "What if either one of the Kunos comes after you, Ranma?" Ranma shrugged his shoulders. "Don't know. Guess I'd need to think about it." He turned to Yukio and Izuku. "Hey, I'm glad you're okay, dude. We gotta get back to the dojo, let everyone know what's going on. With that, the two walked out. Yukio sat there, her eyes not leaving Izuku. His body was still tense, his hand still on the table. Gently, Yukio took his hand into her own and simply held it. She wasn't going to give him flowery words of comfort, or lie to him. All she could do was show that she was there to help him. I want to help, she said, softly. Izuku finally looked up from the table, his eyes meeting hers. Thanks, but I don't want you to get hurt. Or worse, he said, his voice thin. Her grip on his hand tightened for a moment. Can I tell you something? She asked. He nodded his head slowly. I was really worried. And I mean it. I was really worried. You're my friend and seeing you run off like that made me feel useless. That's a feeling I don't ever want to experience again. Her eyes hardened before she continued, so I'm going to help you and Elder Cologne with whatever is going on. I'm not going to just sit on the sidelines. Friends help each other. Even though Shampoo and I have never met eye to eye, I don't want her to get hurt by some supervillain. Izuku smiled. He almost wanted to cry. In fact, he was crying. Small droplets fell from his face as he once again couldn't help but thinking about his friends. Ida and Ochako. They both would have said the same thing. We're friends, right? The words he had said to Ida when Stain was loose and then repeated back to Izuku by Ida before the mission against Overhaul. He wiped away the tears that was rolling down his face before smiling. Right, he said. Yukio smiled back before she stood up. Come on, she said, waving him to follow her. We need to get that finger looked at and Dr. Tofu should still be able to help. It had only been a few hours after Yukio and Izuku returned to the restaurant. According to Dr. Tofu, Izuku's finger would take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks before it was fully healed, meaning he had to be careful with his hand. Tofu had said that the other damages on his hand could extend the length of healing time, but that would have to be seen for later. Entering the empty restaurant, Yukio sighed, placing her large utensil against the counter, letting it lean upon it. Izuku looked about for a moment, his mind working in overdrive. Unlike in his world, he couldn't break himself apart like he did when he first started. Looking upon the bandaged appendage, Izuku grimaced. He remembered what Mr. Aizawa had said to him, not to rely on a recovery girl. Now he was seeing why. In this world, injuries couldn't be healed right away, meaning you had to let them heal on their own. Yukio sighed before turning to Izuku. I think we should got to bed early. You've had a bit of a day, she said, seeing the fatigue on Izuku's face. He nodded slightly before sitting down in one of the booths for a moment. Yukio just watched him for a moment before she started up the grill. He turned to stare at her, only for her to respond with, well, we're not going to bed on empty stomachs. What kind of a monster do you think I am? Izuku chuckled before giving off a small sigh. A plan was slowly forming in his head. He needed to stop these villains and find Shampoo. That left one option left for him. Sitting there, his eyes flashed to the small closet behind the counter. His gear was still inside it. He hadn't worn it in a couple of days, yet once again he was planning to wear it again. Yukio finished what she was doing before sitting 2 plates down upon the table. Pushing one of them towards Izuku, she began slowly eating her own. About halfway through, she sighed before setting down her chopsticks. I know what you're thinking, she said. I had hoped you wouldn't, to just let your injury heal. Izuku's eyes met Yukio's. She could see the fire behind them, the determination. She frowned for a moment. To the outside viewer, they were just staring at each other, but to the two of them they were having a silent conversation. After some time, Yukio relented. Fine, but you are still staying with me, got it? I don't want you going back to constantly being on the run. Izuku nodded before he stood up. He made his way over to the closet and pulled his hero suit out. Its ragged form made him wince. Some tears here and there but nothing major. He started putting the suit on, much to Yukio's dismay. One day, she finally said. Can't you rest for one day before going back out there? The question was broken inside her chest. She didn't know why she was giving so much care to this person. She knew him for maybe a couple of months, yet she worried for him like she did for Ranma. Izuku stopped before turning to her. I'm sorry. I can't. Shampoo's in this situation because I didn't slow down and actually try to return home. I tried to do it on my own. Now I have no choice, I have to get out there and stop these new villains. He stopped for a moment before attaching his arm braces, then his gloves. They wouldn't be here if it wasn't for me. Their powers and abilities. That's my fault and I have to fix it. He grabbed his mask and face guard, just staring into the eye holes of the mask. It was then that he felt a weight on his back as arms reached around his front, holding onto him in a hug. Yukio's face was buried in his back, soft tears flowing from her eyes. Let me help. Please. Izuku placed his hands upon hers, simply holding them. After a couple of minutes, he slowly raised the mask over his head before setting the face guard and mask into place. He turned, looking her in the eye through the mask. His eyes were as soft as he could make them. You've helped more than you realize. Thank you, Yukio. I mean it, but this is something I have to do. Yukio's tears continued to fall, but her face morphed into anger. You idiot. You don't have to do this alone, she shouted, hammering her fist into his chest. Let me go with you. Or hell, have Ranma or Cologne or anyone go with you. Don't do this alone. What happens when you get into a fight that you can't win? What then? Or worse, something else breaks. Like your leg or your arm. What then? She continued to hammer his chest, each strike getting weaker. I don't want to lose you. Izuku slowly gripped her shoulders, not realizing that both of them had landed upon the ground on their knees. It was like they had moved there on their own. Yukio, you don't need to worry about me, he said, his voice even. You're friends with Ranma, and from what I understand this isn't anything new. Dealing with supernatural threats. You're not Ranma. Yukio practically screamed, her anger rising. You're my friend. I don't need to fight for your attention. Whenever we talk, I don't have to worry about you just disappearing or having to fight with others. I'm Ranma's fiancé, but I'm not the only one racing for his attention. She whipped away a tear. If I lost you, what then? I go back to fighting for the attention of a guy who only sees me as a friend. Akane and Shampoo don't see it, but I do. I'm losing this race. Out of the three of us, Akane is winning. The girl who acts like she wants nothing to do with him has his attention. She placed her hands in her lap, she was openly weeping at this point. It's been nice, having something the others don't. A friend who isn't strapped to this stuff. Who could care less about the relationship drama that swirls around us? Akane does, I think, but she hardly ever hangs out with them outside of school. Izuku could feel his chest clench. Something inside him was hurt, feeling empathy for the struggles that Yukio had to go through. It must be hard, being engaged to someone who already had other suitors. Can't you just call off the engagement? Izuku asked. Yukio laughed sourly, I wish. Remember what I told you a while ago? About how I ended up engaged to him. If I call off the engagement, then mine and Ranma's honor becomes tarnished. I'm seen in the eyes of the world as shameful. I can't do that to him. She ran her hands through her hair, making it more messy than it was. Her clothing was ruffled, though that was from all the crying. She looked at Izuku, her eyes losing some of the color it had. I don't want to lose the one thing I have going for me, please just let me help. Izuku sat on his knees for a moment before standing up. He offered her his hand, pulling her up to her feet. He then reached around her, and hugged her as hard as he could without hurting her. You've done more than you know already, he said simply. Yukio sniffed before reaching up and taking the mask off. Without even thinking, she reached up, grabbed his head and kissed him. It was brief. A moment of respite. The pent-up anger, frustration, and care all wrapped in one moment. Yukio pulled away, her eyes horrified. "I am so," she started to say, but before she could say anything, Izuku reached, pulled her close, and continued the kiss. It felt like instinct had taken over. Their bodies were moving on their own, holding on to one another like a lifeline. It felt different, to hold another human being in their arms when all they have done is fight. This one moment, it didn't matter. It was two people, letting their frustrations out on the world. Finally, they both came up for air, placing their foreheads upon one another. They're breathing heavily. The world slowly came back into view as the two were once more on the floor. Their clothes were still on, thank goodness, but something else was stirring within. The longing to continue, to push forward. They looked into each other's eyes before Izuku finally spoke. "One day," he said in between breaths. "What?" she asked, confused. "I'll rest for one day," he said. She smiled a little before closing her eyes, her head still leaning into him. "After that, that's all you have to say." Izuku blushed. "I don't know what to say, yet no." He held her for a moment, trying to think of what to say. You're important to me. I'm still trying to piece it together, I guess." It's only been a recent development. He let go of her for a moment, only so he could look at her. Yukio smiled sadly. She knew what he meant. "You know we can't be together." It wasn't a question. "Yeah," he said. "Being fiancés with another person. Doing what we just did is worse. It could ruin you if anyone found out. You would be marked with a scarlet letter." He placed his hand upon Yukio's shoulder, giving it a light squeeze. "But I want you to know. I'm here for you. If you need a shoulder to cry on." Izuku was trying as hard as he could not to start mumbling at 1,000,000 miles a minute, doing his best to keep his composure. He was the guy who could barely talk to a girl, let alone kiss one, just a year ago. It showed him exactly how much of his life had changed him. Yukio sighed, reaching up and gripping Izuku's hand. What she wanted was far from sane. She wanted to be with Ranma, but there were reasons why she couldn't be. She wanted to be with Izuku, but couldn't because of Ranma. It had only been a few days, but her mind was being flooded with thoughts of Izuku, his life and the stories he had told her. Of a world full of heroes and villains and standing up for what you believed in. She closed her eyes again, leaning into the contact upon her shoulder. She knew why she had kissed him. She was touch-starved. She wanted to be affectionate with someone she cared for. Before Izuku arrived, that had been Ranma, but now? She honestly didn't know. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Izuku raised an eyebrow. "For what?" She opened her eyes before locking eyes with him. "I shouldn't be dragging you into this my situation. You shouldn't have to deal with this." "I'm sorry, Izuku. I can't be with you." Not until Ranma decides," she said it. Until her relationship with Ranma was completely nullified would she be able to figure out what she wanted. "Until then we have to remain friends." Izuku smiled before standing up, once more offering her a hand up. "Well then, it seems like I'm going to be here for a while anyway. What's a few more months?" Yukio laughed before helping herself up again. "It might be a bit more than months." Izuku shrugged before the two started to laugh, if nothing else but to share in the ridiculousness that was life in Narima. Unbeknownst to them, standing just in the corner of the shop was a small dust bin, hiding in the shadows of the restaurant. It had slowly made its way inside the building only to catch the end of the conversation, witnessing the kiss between the two. Upon seeing that, the bin left as quietly as it had come in before changing. Its form became a slimy texture until it formed once more into Tsubasa. His eyes were narrowed, his body fully forming until he was standing tall. He spluttered. And he spat before kicking at one of the garbage bins in the alleyway he found himself in. Bad enough she uses her fiancé as an excuse. What's the deal with Midoriya? She's only known him a few days at best. No, he has to be doing something to her. And I'm going to find out what, he announced before once more his body changed. When Tsubasa had been given his quirk he hadn't learned what it could do, but no he knew. His power was to transform into whatever he could think of. As long as he was concentrating upon the form he wanted to take, he would become that object. Trash can. No problem. Bed. Easy. His normal form, dress included. Oh yes. His quirk was strong, according to the MSTR, powerful in the right circumstances. And he would do all he could to make the MSTR happy. He wanted izukumidoriya. After what he just saw. Izukumidoriya had just taken the top of his list, replacing Ranma® entirely. The next morning. Izuku awoke with a start, his body feeling rather sore after the ordeal from yesterday. Apparently being thrown through trees would do that to a human being. After talking with Yukio, he had laid down in his hero gear, passing out almost as soon as his head hit the pillow. Sitting up, he looked about, wondering if Yukio was up yet. After last night, he didn't know how to feel towards the owner of the okonomiyaki shop. He knew that he liked her, cared about her. He hadn't known what had possessed him to kiss her. Maybe it was impulse or instinct. It wasn't that far-fetched to think that he liked her. Swinging his legs out from the cot, he looked down at his finger. Bending it slightly stung, but he needed to so that it wouldn't stiffen up or worse. He closed his fist ever so often, keeping his hand out so that way he didn't bump anything. He didn't know what he was going to do today. Yukio made him swear that he wouldn't do anything today other than rest, but he couldn't stay in bed all day. He finally finished closing his hand before he began cleaning up his bedding. No point leaving it out. After a couple of minutes, Yukio came down from the stairs. Their eyes for a moment before she looked away, making her way to the grill. Food. That was all she wanted at that moment. She started cooking, pulling out her ingredients from their usual spot. As she poured some of it on the grill, her eyes would wander to Izuku for a moment. She didn't know what she should do. Last night, once she had gone to bed, she had a rather odd dream. She had seen Yokohama, but it was different. More destroyed. She had found herself walking the streets, wandering a destroyed section of the city. As she did, she had stumbled upon a small pavilion, with marbled ground, and in the center was a large statue, a rather muscular man was standing there, his right fist lifted into the sky. Underneath the statue was a plaque that read, "In honor of All Might, in memory of his last victory as the symbol of peace." She watched as a couple of people came out of part of the ruble before placing a sign around the statue's neck. The sign had a big red X across its face saying, "I am not here." She had awoken after seeing the people vandalize the statue, her mind running a marathon. Had she seen into Izuku's world? She knew about All Might, but did they ever have a statue? She could remember. All she knew was she needed to talk to him about it. After a couple of seconds, once the food was cooked she finally sighed. No point waiting. "Hey, Izuku." He looked up, wondering what was wrong. Her voice was quiet, almost unsure of herself. "What's up?" "Is it about last night?" he asked slowly. He knew she was avoiding his gaze. She nodded slowly. She was about to say something before Izuku spoke again. "I'm really sorry. I think I just made this more awkward between us." She stopped for a moment before she tried to speak again, only for Izuku's mouth to start spewing out words, so fast she could barely follow it. It wasn't until he mentioned the kiss did her face break into a large blush. She reached over the counter and grabbed the large spatula. "Stop freaking out." Yukio shouted, slamming it down upon Izuku's head, giving his head a good old-fashioned reset. Izuku was stunned for a moment before he shook it off. She sighed before putting the large utensil down before she finally spoke. "Look, I had a rather strange dream last night, okay?" Izuku opened his mouth more a moment before slapping his hand over it, simply nodding. He didn't want to draw her ire any more than it already did. "In the dream, I was in Yokohama." "Izuku, is there a statue there of All Might?" In the center of a pavilion? Izuku's eyes widened, a look of realization slowly spreading across it. He slowly lowered his hand, placing it upon the counter. Yes, there is. It's at ground zero, meant to show. To show All Might in his last victory as the symbol of peace, whatever that is, she finished. That's your world, isn't it? Yes, it is, he said. I can't believe you saw that in a dream. He stood from his seat, placing his hand upon his cheek. Slowly he began to pace, thinking of what could have possibly allowed her to see his world. There's two possible ways, he said finally after about a half an hour. Either the barrier between our worlds is getting weaker. Which is likely because All for One has started making routine trips. Yukio commented. Izuku nodded, or, you managed to get some of my memories from the kiss. Which I doubt. Yukio said, sternly. Her face was once again blushing. Was the statue vandalized last time you saw it? Izuku furrowed his eyebrows in thought. No, I don't think so, he said. Then his eyes widened. Wait. Vandalized? What do you mean? Yukio scoffed for a moment before speaking. Well, a couple people were out and putting a sign around its neck, saying he wasn't there or some such. Izuku sat down, his face looking slightly betrayed. Betrayed by himself. Once again, the lack of foresight had caused this. Had he still been in his world, the people wouldn't feel like All Might was missing. He placed his hand down upon the table. He needed to get stronger. If he was stuck dealing with All for One's new minions here, he needed to become stronger. But how? Yukio watched him for a moment, watching his expressions change and morph so rapidly. It was a testament to their friendship that she had an idea what was going through his mind, seeing as how he was flexing his musicals ever known and then, checking them. You want to get stronger? Why don't you talk to Ranma? Izuku stopped, looking at her with a question in his eye, one she could already answer. Well, when something new comes up, Ranma will usually get stronger or figure out the best way to fight it. Why not find out if he can help you? Izuku thought about it for a moment. Could he help? Would he help? Thinking about it, Izuku knew he would. And on the plus side, this would allow them to become just a little more friendly instead of hostile. Izuku wouldn't have to worry about his back while fighting from the front. He smiled before he stood up. Why don't we go talk to him together, he asked. Yukio smiled as well before nodding her head. Today was looking a lot brighter than it had started, that was for sure. Immediately after Shampoo disappeared. The swirling vortex that had dragged the two away slowly faded, revealing a small laboratory of sorts. Shampoo had only moments to adjust before turning, seeing the one who brought her here slowly walking towards one of the many tables that was strewn throughout the room. My dear, he started to say, you have made the right decision. He pulled out some kind of jar from underneath, a hidden compartment attached to the table. In the jar was some kind of swirling miasma. With a touch of his hand the miasma slowly began to pull towards the top of the jar, slowly disappearing until there was nothing but an empty jar. The power I am about to give you is one that is very similar to my own, yet different on its own. This quirk is called copycat, though at present it's not very powerful. He placed the jar down before turning his mask towards Shampoo. She was standing there, her face blank. Inside the mask, All for One smiled to himself. Approaching her, he once more held his hand out to her. With it, you could copy any technique or power you have witnessed at least once. The catch is you know how to perform it correctly, but your body may not be able to handle the backlash. Shampoo stared at his hand for a couple seconds, not knowing what she could say. With her time as an Amazon, she would know thousands of combat tricks, dozens of options for fighting. Hell, she could probably copy the powers of those that she would see. However, she felt hesitant. All for One noticed the hesitation, slowly lowering his hand. Do you not want this power? I believe it is the only reason you came with me, he said simply. After all, as you currently are, you are simply too weak to simply take what you believe is rightfully yours. She felt her eyes narrow and in a flash, she grabbed his hand with both of hers. Tightened her grip upon it. Feeling her hands upon his own, All for One willed the quirk to enter into Shampoo. At first nothing happened, Shampoo feeling a warmth wash over her. Then, in a matter of minutes, Shampoo felt a pain enter her stomach. She fell to her knees, nausea kicking in. Of course, those from this world that receive a quirk seem to mutate the quirk once it's been given. I wonder how yours will change, he asked himself, simply watching the young woman as she began to curl up into a ball. Her hands clenched her stomach. She could feel it, the warmth was no longer spreading through her body, but was now attacking it. She could feel her very being changed. Her skin, her bones, her DNA. It was no longer of this world. She let out a small scream of pain, trying to clench her teeth and bear it. After a couple of minutes that felt like an eternity, Shampoo felt the pain subside. Her body was no longer fighting the invasive force that was now within. In one horrifying moment, she felt like she wasn't herself. Like her skin was just a little too tight. Slowly, she stood, her arms and legs shaking. All for One was watching her, his face hidden behind that accursed mask. She wanted to speak. To say anything. All for One spoke, his voice soft, I know my dear. He was no longer speaking Chinese, but Japanese. Why not test it out? Test what out, she spoke. After a second, her hand flew to her throat. She hadn't said that in Chinese. She had switched to Japanese without even thinking. What is happening, she said, her voice coming out in a whisper. Your new quirk at play. All for One said. You have heard people speak in Japanese, thus you can speak it fluently. He held his arms out almost in a displaying manner. This is but one gift your new quirk will give you. Once you have mastered it, you will be even stronger than you were before. Shampoo's eyes widened before she slumped upon the table. This power, it was something that had completely changed her. She no longer felt like herself, forced into this new shell of her former self. Her skin felt tighter, heavier. What had she done? Once izukumidoriya is returned to me, he and I will leave this world, allowing you and the other chosen to change this world however you see fit. All for One spoke, turning to walk away, deeper into the laborator. Once that's done, I hope to return to this world and see what you all have done with it, with your newfound freedom. As he walked, his form growing thinner and thinner until there was nothing but a wisp of smoke. Shampoo watched the man, her eyes never leaving his form. When he disappeared, Shampoo felt as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Lifting herself up from the table, she looked about. The lab was fairly sized, with a portion of the facility blacked out in darkness. Close by, she could see a staircase, leading up to a higher floor. This must be a basement laboratory. Slowly, she ascended the stairs, her feet shaking with each step. Finally, once she reached the top, she found herself standing in a small house, almost like a shed. The front door to said building was right in front of her, so with some trepidation, she opened the door. It opened to reveal the forest from before, the leaves blowing in the wind as they fell. Stepping outside, the light from the sun blinding her. Lifting up her arm to shield her eyes, she glanced about. It was a compound of some kind, with a rather tall wall surrounding it. The building she was walking out of was a small shack next to a large building. Looking up, her eyes caught someone staring back at her. A familiar-looking girl was staring at her from a window from the second story. Kodachi. The name came easier to her. Well, if it isn't the Amazon, a rather haughty voice said. I did not believe he would convince one of Saitome's brood to accept his offer, yet here you are. There, standing off to the side was Tatewaki Kuno. Brood? Shampoo said, hearing the word for the first time, yet she felt information being jammed into her head, telling her the meaning behind it. Her eyes narrowed, her head slowly aching. I don't know what you're implying. She's articulate now. Once more the MSTR provides a miracle, showing the limitless potential for his power. Kuno said, smirking, you know full well what I'm implying. The only member after the young snake worth anything is Akane Tendo. Though as her brother, I am required to say my sister is a part of that. He shifted his feet for a moment before simply crossing his arms and leaning against the house. What is she doing, might I ask? Shampoo asked, her voice taking in the same cadence as Kuno's. Her eyes widened before her hands slapped over her mouth. Between her fingers she said, copying the very speech patterns of those I meet. This power will be rather trite. Now she could see why the man in black didn't want this power. It felt like it was overriding her brain, changing things about herself. Kuno seemed to ignore her for a moment, glancing to the second floor before catching his sister's eye. She simply stared at him for a moment before the curtain to her room hid her from sight. He smirked to himself for a moment before he spoke. My sister was the first to receive powers from him. We had met him about a month ago, when he first arrived. He offered us power and in exchange we would capture izukumidoriya. He gave my sister power, yet it wasn't enough for her. Kuno wiped a fake tear from his eye. She makes me proud. In her pursuit, he gave her powers, each demand of more was met in kind. Finally, after the third power, she went silent. She has yet to speak a word. Quite the improvement if you ask me. Shampoo was shaking. The look on Kodachi's face when she had seen her looked so dead, lifeless. There wasn't a spark behind her eyes, yet seeing her brother brought emotion to her face, a look of pure loathing and rage. This isn't right. Yet she had chosen this. Then why, pray tell, am I here if you all have powers that rival Midoriya's? Kuno's smirk fell from his face, his eyes now meeting Shampoo's. His face twitched in rage for a moment before it faded, because the MSTR wanted someone that had battled him. Someone who had tasted defeat through Midoriya. Kuno growled, his hands unfolding before he slammed his fist into the side of the building, blue sparks arcing from his hand creating a wave of electricity to race across the exposed metal. He had wanted Ranma %. Shampoo's eyes widened. What do you mean? I mean he wanted to have Sotome battle with Midoriya, use him as the ultimate weapon against Midoriya. Kuno shouted, his hands sparking even more electricity. He spent an entire month manipulating his emotions, making it to where the two would clash. It was only once he spoke of his plan to us did we object. We told him Ranma %, would be the worst possible candidate for him to use. He was breathing hard now, his body slightly shaking. He pulled his hand away from the metal frame of the house, the electricity no longer dancing along it. Only once he heard what we had to say did he believe us. He turned away from Shampoo, his shoulders shaking violently. Now then, if you shall excuse me, Amazonian harlot, I must rest. We must prepare to attack once more. He then proceeded to step into the house. The moment his foot entered the house, his frame changed, crackling with electricity. In a matter of seconds, his form dissipated, blue sparks bouncing and flowing along the metal frame of the home. Shampoo's eyes glared at the spot Kuno had been before, sighing. This was going to be tougher than she thought it was going to be. She turned back towards the yard of the compound, getting a feel for the environment. She slowly walked out, standing in the center of a rather nice garden. Full of hot air, isn't he? A new voice said, coming from one of the benches. Shampoo's eyebrows raised in confusion for a moment, that was until a head slowly started to come from it, revealing Tsubasa. Kuno, I mean. Shampoo blinked for a moment before nodding. She could feel the previous speech pattern loosen before the more casual one took hold. I suppose so. Seems like but, really. Tsubasa laughed. On that, we agree. Slowly the bench was disappearing in a pile of gloppy slime before solidifying into the man's human form, dress and all. I've only been with these guys a couple of days now and have yet to step out of the compound. They keep telling me I will get in the way, at least until I can control my quirk. That word, Shampoo said, her voice full of confusion. Quirk, the man from before called my power a quirk too. Is that what they're called? She asked the question, yet a part of her mind told her she knew it was. It felt like a part of her mind was missing and obtaining the information she desired would complete it. Tsubasa nodded his head. Yeah, I don't know all the information about quirks, but I'm gathering there's some supernatural ability. Only explanation I can think of, you know, he sighed, rubbing his forehead. My power has its uses, but it can be such a headache. Shampoo looked about the small garden, her mind wondering. It was strange. This new power she had felt foreign, unnatural. Yet, she had been the one to take this route. It was her choice. So, what's the point of this place, she asked, the words much easier to say than it had once been. The compound? Tsubasa asked, it's kind of a headquarters of sorts. From what I understand it was one of the Kuno family's out-of-town dojos. Super rich from what I gather. The Kuno family wasn't using it, so Kuno gave it to the guy in black. He frowned slightly. Though, why we're so far from Tokyo, they'll never understand. Shampoo's eyes narrowed slightly. How far exactly? From what I can gather. We're somewhere in the middle of Hokkaido. That far? Shampoo asked, jumping to her feet. What were they doing on that mountain then? You mean the one near Naruma? Yeah, it's another hideout. I was staying there originally, but the guy with the mask told us it wouldn't last as a hideout. That we would have to come here. He sighed for a moment, before standing up. Anyways. I need to get going. He should be back by now, so hopefully he can get me back to Naruma before that day is out. He. Who's he? Shampoo asked. Taro. Big bull guy. The guy in black gave him like a bunch of powers in his bull form. Apparently it can handle them better. Tsubasa smiled to himself. I'm hoping that Taro can get me back so I can see Yukio. Yukio, Shampoo said, a bitter tone seeping into her voice. You know her, do you? Tsubasa nodded, not paying her any mind. Yeah. I love her. Shampoo stayed quiet. She didn't want to start a fight amongst themselves by fighting about Yukio. Not worth it. Anyways. I'll see you around. It'll be a pleasure to work with you in the future. It was rather quiet at the Tendo dojo when Izuku and Yukio arrived. It had been even stranger that Kasumi led them into the main room without much to say, simply waving them into the room, a look of worry on her face. Upon entering, the entire family was sitting around the table in the center of the room. Ranma looked up from it, his eyes meeting with Izuku's for a moment. So, what's up? That was the start at least. Izuku felt a small tightness in his gut out of nervousness. He knew how he wanted this conversation to go, but putting it into words was going to be tough. Still standing in the doorway, Izuku and Yukio sat on their knees. His eyes shifted to Yukio for a moment, a steely look evident behind it. Yet, in her defiance, she looked back, daring him to say something to the contrary. In just a matter of seconds the two managed to have a silent conversation, leaving Izuku looking away from her. Then, both of them bowed, their heads low and hands planted in front of them. Ranma frowned at them for a moment, waiting for one of them to speak. He knew why they were here. He already had his answer, but he needed to be sure. He needed them to ask. With everything that was going on, the two elders of the house had made it quite clear that unless he was asked to help, not to bother with the battle that was coming. After all, what was one suitor less for Akane to fight? Both Ranma and Akane weren't exactly impressed with their parents, but had no choice in the matter, as it seemed to be when they were concerned. I need your help. Izuku said simply. He didn't immediately lift his head before he began speaking again. You're a skilled martial artist, Ranma, which means when this newly made League of Villains attacks, you could help. Ranma leaned on his hand, before sighing. I had every intention of helping. Quite your bowing, would ya? He said. His eyes narrowed as Yukio lifted her head, yet Izuku continued to bow. I thought you might. Izuku said, slowly lifting his head. But that's not the only other request I have. His eyes meet Ranma's. I need your help. Yukio mentioned that you might be able to help me become stronger. Stronger? Ranma asked, incredulously. You're already strong as it is, aren't you? Not quite. Izuku said in a small voice. Sure, I'm strong. But it needs to be refined. Controlled. Just having the power alone isn't enough, I need to be able to focus it, make it more precise. Izuku was reminded of the fight with Muscular before he had been sent here, how he had focused his attack on the edges of his nerves. How much more damage that had done over his limit-breaking attack back at the camp. If you could train me. Ranma cut him off mid-sentence. I can't. Ranma. Akane whispered slightly, a frustrated tone in her voice. He's asking you for help. And I would help if I could. Ranma shouted, slamming his fist into the table. Yet, I don't know if you've noticed, I'm not a MSTR of anything goes martial arts. I can't exactly train him properly, can I? He sighed, once more leaning upon his hands. I'll help when any of those quirk-filled freaks show up, but I can't do much else beyond that. Ranma wanted to punch himself. He knew what he says was true, but more than anything he wanted to help Izuku. What does being MSTR have to do with training him? Akane asked, irritated. You cannot be that dense. Ranma started to say, only for Akane to swiftly pull out the trusty mallet from nowhere, slamming down upon his head. Don't yell at me, you JRK. Akane screamed. The two began to shout at one another, slowly getting more and more heated. Yukio simply sat back, her hands in her lap. She knew why Ranma couldn't train Izuku. She felt so dumb, bringing him here. She knew it would end up like this, it always did. Yet, as the two were fighting, Izuku stood up with his face flush. You two, please stop yelling, he said, rather quietly. It was clear he was becoming uncomfortable. Yukio sighed before pulling her large spatula off her back and slamming it down upon the table, making a loud reverberating sound echo throughout the room. Normally I'm all for letting this squabble escalate, but we do not have the time. Yukio shouted. Once she was sure Ranma and Akane wouldn't begin fighting again, she placed the large utensil upon her back once more. The fact of the matter is, Izuku got his answers. Ranma is willing to help when the others inevitably come back to attack Izuku, and he will not train Izuku, she sighed before turning to Izuku, giving him a small smile. Was that everything? Izuku nodded slowly. She nodded back before giving a soft bow to the two of them. Then we shall leave you two to continue fighting in your love language or whatever, she teases. Ranma and Akane blanched at her words. For two reasons, one being that she was teasing them and only Akane knew the second reason. Izuku also offered a soft bow, giving his thanks before he and Yukio left the two in the room. Ranma began to rub his eyes, irritated with that particular interaction. Come on, Ranma. What does being a MSTR have to do with helping Izuku? Akane asked, this time after she took a deep breath. I'm still surprised you're asking. Ranma said simply before closing his eyes. As long as Hapasai is the Grandmaster and the old men are the masters, they are the only ones who can actually teach our art. Anything I learn goes into our art, hence the name, anything goes martial arts. He opened his eyes. He stood up and approached the paper door leading outside. He opened the door slowly before sitting down, letting the brisk air pelt his face. Until I beat Hapasai in a challenge, I won't be able to teach him anything. And you know why I haven't done that yet. Akane slowly nodded, before she too joined him outside. She sat down, letting the cool air wash over her. I see, was all she said, a sad tone in her voice. They sat there, if for a moment to enjoy the moment of normalcy. Change was on the horizon, everyone could feel it. It was only a matter of time before something came of it. Yukio and Izuku walked away from the Tendo dojo, a silence following them as they walked. The sun was hanging high in the sky, yet they could feel the cold chill of winter coming. Are you okay? Yukio finally said after a while, looking over her shoulder at Izuku. He stopped for a moment in surprise before giving a small smile. Yeah, I'm good. I'm just glad I have backup when they show up. Yukio nodded in understanding before returning to their walk. After a couple of blocks she stopped for a moment before turning to Izuku. Hey, Izuku, he stopped again, a curious look upon his visage. Why don't we go and get some ice cream? I find something sweet can take the edge off of this chill. Izuku's smile grew bigger before nodding his head. He was glad he had made friends with Yukio. If there was one positive to being stranded here, was the people he had met on the way. It wasn't much, but it helped him get by. Yet every once in a while, he would catch himself thinking of home. Of All Might, Ida, Uraka, and Eri. He would remember his friends and give a sad smile. He would clean up his mess, then he would find his way home. Of that, he was sure. After some time, not a whole lot had changed. In 2 weeks, Izuku had returned to patrolling Naruma, yet he would return to Yukio's every night, at her insistence. It didn't take long for the papers to start claiming that the Demon of Japan was back, looking no worse for wear. Flying through the air, keeping his gaze open. Ranma and his group had also become more aware of their surroundings, constantly on edge, waiting for someone to attack. After a while, the tension was getting so thick, hardly anyone spoke. That was why, on one fateful day, it sniped like a cord. It was a normal day, with Ranma and Akane simple walking home from school, just like any other. That was until the fence that Ranma was walking along suddenly glowed a brilliant blue in an instant before electricity fired from it, like a thunderclap. Ranma swiftly leapt from the fence, mere inches from being fried. Upon landing, he looked about, hoping to find his assailant. Ranma, Akane shouted in worry. Are you okay? I'm fine, Akane. Ranma said, keeping his stance high. Did you see where that came from? When she shook her head, he clicked his tongue in announce before looking about. Out of the corner of his eye he spotted another glowing bolt of lighting, swiftly making its way towards him. Look out, he shouted, diving to tackle Akane to the ground. It worked, the bolt flying harmlessly over their heads, making the hairs on the back of their necks stand at attention. Standing up once more, Ranma and Akane looked from where the bolt had come from and stopped abruptly. There, clad in his traditional kimono was Tatewaki Kuno. He had his Bakken in his grip, reversed in hand like it was sheathed, yet his pinky finger was running itself along the edge of the handle. Kuno. Ranma shouted, his eyes narrowing. I see you narrowly missed my attacks, Sotome. Kuno said, slowly approaching, his finger a couple of inches from his stick. I must admit, when I had arrived to find Midoriya, I had not happened upon my luck in discovering you in the wild. His face twisted into a nasty grin, more so than was normal for Kuno. To think my opportunity would be given to me after so long a wait, he dropped his pinky down upon the Bakken and a bolt of blue electricity once more flew at Ranma and Akane. They dived out of the way, but not before the bolt hit the hem of Akane's skirt, the edges of it becoming singed from the contact. For a split second, her skirt lit aflame before she patted them down. Be careful, Ranma. Remember what we were told by Cologne. No duh. Ranma whispered to himself, once more getting himself into a stance to fight. Kuno was still walking towards them, his face still twisted with glee. I will remove you from the equation, Sotome. Once you are gone, the MSTR will see how foolhardy it would have been to rely upon you, he shouted, finally in a full sprint towards Ranma. Kuno flipped the Bakken in his hand, gripping the handle with 2 hands before raising it above his head. Quickly, Ranma braced his body, ready to counter-attack. Once Kuno got into attacking range, he swung the Bakken down. As he swung, a spark of electricity moved along the metal pole that had been added to the Bakken. Upon finishing the swing, like lightning, the spark leaped from the back of the Bakken and slammed into the ground, right between Ranma's feet. Just being in the vicinity of the attack hurt, blasting Ranma backwards with a shout, his brief legs shredding and becoming singed from the attack. He landed HRD on his back, yet he didn't have time to recover as Kuno ran after him, swinging the bakken again. Thinking quickly, Ranma propped himself up into the air using a single hand. With his body in the air, he kicked out, aiming to kick the bakken off target. The moment his foot made contact, he felt a sharp shock run through his body, once more throwing a couple of feet away. He rolled until his body slammed into the side of a building. Grunting, Ranma looked at Kuno. To his credit, Kuno wasn't smirking or laughing. No, Kuno's visage was twisted into that vile, hate-filled smile. He looked possessed. "What the hell happened to you?" Ranma asked, slowly raising himself up, using the wall to steady himself. His arms and legs felt numb, he could feel his muscles spasming, especially in his right foot. Trying to keep himself upright was becoming a challenge. Kuno stopped for a moment, his grin shrinking slightly. "You wish to know, Sotome? Or are you trying to stall our fight?" he said, his bakken slightly shaking. "You foul monster," he shouted, preparing to strike again. This time, Ranma dived, aiming for one of Kuno's legs. The bakken flew over his head, missing him by inches. Ranma heard the loud boom from the attack hitting the side of the building. Ranma wrapped his arms around Kuno's leg, before pulling it out from under him. Kuno's frame fell, his bakken flying from his hand. "Gotcha!" Ranma thought to himself as Kuno's body hit the ground. Quickly, Ranma stood before attempting to axe kick him in the face. Quickly, Kuno rolled out of the way, his frame swiftly reaching the fallen weapon. Ranma removed his foot from where Kuno's head used to before running after him. Flipping over the rolling boy, Ranma delivered a kick to Kuno's side, stopping him mid-roll. Ranma reached down, picking up the bakken. "What was that you were saying, Kuno?" "Heard to me like a lot of bluster to me," he said, swinging the bakken a couple of times. It was heavier than normal. Then again, that was probably because of the added piece of metal along the spin of the weapon. Gripping his side, Kuno stood up. Though he was grinning more now. "You would say that, Sotome," he said before looking at him. In a flash, Kuno's form shifted, becoming a blur. His kimono hit the floor as a spark of electricity excited out of them. It practically propelled towards Ranma like a bullet. In surprise, Ranma swung the weapon at whatever it was that Kuno had become. However, the moment Kuno's new form met the weapon, Ranma once more felt that pain of being shocked, his hands burning as the metal conducted the electricity that was Tatewaki Kuno. Letting go of the weapon, Ranma stumbled back, his hands stinging. Kuno's form once more became human-like, gripping the bakken. Quickly, he slid his pinky along the spin, before firing another projectile at Ranma. "Damn it!" Ranma shouted, letting the attack fly past him. "Your new power is bullshit." Once again, Ranma launched himself, this time to the side. Upon reaching the building, Ranma quickly caught himself on the wall before Kuno once more tried to attack. Ducking again, Ranma felt the bakken hit the building. In his low stance, Ranma was able to pop into his attack, launching a series of punches into Kuno's chest. With a grunt, Kuno jumped back. He held his stomach for a moment before growling. "Still a sly one, aren't you, Ranma?" he said. Ranma once more got into a defensive stance. He had to be careful. The first couple of attacks were just the learning stage. Now it was time for an offensive strike. Running forward, Ranma pulled his punch back, telegraphing his next attack. Kuno went to counter, but Ranma feinted, pulling his punch back before tucking himself down, launching his foot out towards Kuno, planting it into his abdomen. Using his leg like a fulcrum, Ranma lifted Kuno into the air before spinning in place and kicking him away. Kuno flew through the air before hitting the ground and rolling. Kuno stopped, slowly rose once more before staring Ranma down. "Do you think yourself impressive?" he asked. "Sotome. You really are pathetic. Do you believe I am fighting you at full strength?" He gripped his bakken in one hand before charging, rushing forwards. Ranma had enough time to put his arms up before the bakken hit his forearms. Ranma was pushed back. Widening his stance, Ranma threw a punch as a counterattack. His fist made contact with Kuno's face. Swiftly he attacked again, punching his chest, then his side. Rapid-firing punches, Kuno was battered backwards. With one last strike, Ranma planted his fist into Kuno's face and slammed him into the ground. Breathing heavily, Ranma finally spoke, "Full strength? Please. That's rather lousy." Ranma took a deep breath, trying to settle his heart rate down. He had been hit with so much electricity it was a wonder it was still working. Standing up, Ranma planted his foot down, just hitting Kuno's head hard enough to try and knock him out. "Ranma!" Akane shouted, running over to him. "Are you okay?" she asked. He nodded for a moment, his foot still planted on Kuno's face. "Yeah, superpowers or not, it's still Kuno," he said simply. He went to take a step but found he couldn't move his foot. Looking down, he found Kuno had gripped his bare leg inside his ripped leggings. "You lose," was all Kuno said before Ranma felt a large amount of pain shooting up from his leg and blacking out all at once. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 4. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Kane541204 on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.